We need to go back, emphasize some things about Keynes, and try to pull all the little parts of his theory together to make sure that you get them. Our key is spending. In the Keynesian world, it's about spending. When the workers at the casinos get laid off, that means they don't get their haircut, they buy fewer groceries, they don't go out to eat. Spending from one person turns into income for another. The whole circular flow circulates. When something happens to spending, now we have an issue. Here's a little numerical example. Let's suppose that we spend 3/4 of every new dollar we get, or we don't spend 3/4 of any dollar we lose. When that happens, that's our marginal propensity to consume. That's our MPC. So if one person spends 100, the next person gets 100 in income, they're going to spend 75. That's income for whoever they spend that with. That person gets 75 in income, they're going to spend $56.25. That they go to the doctor here, they spend $56.25 at the doctor. That's income for that doctor, who then goes out and spends $42.19. If we add up just these four people, there's $273.44 of spending, which means we generated $273.44 of income from that initial $100. And it's not done. Somebody got that $42.19 and they're going to spend it. So we're going to get hundreds and hundreds of dollars. All right, in your book, there's the math of how to do this because of our unusual circumstances. Don't worry about the math of how we do this. Just remember that any economic change in the Keynesian world is going to result in multiple cycles of spending and income. This is known as the multiplier effect, the Keynesian multiplier. The classicals would tell you that this thing doesn't happen, that there is no multiplier effect in the economy. That's, according to a Keynesian, a pipe dream. That's not the way the world works. And again, you guys, for each of you individually, you get to decide whether or not this is the way the world works, because clearly economists have argued about this for 100 years. But it's called the multiplier effect. The multiplier effect. Couple that with this idea of animal spirits. The stock market's been bouncing up and down for the last 3 weeks on rumors, and this is what's happening, and this might happen, and it goes up, and it goes down, and it goes... And nobody knows. They're following the crowd. They're guessing about what's going on. They're scared. They've got animal spirits problems. Okay? Animal spirits. If we understand Keynes, then we don't think, and we believe in Keynes, then we don't think the economy fixes itself. We think that when it heads down, it tends to make itself worse, not that it fixes itself and gets better. The economy is not stable. It's not self-correcting. And to make good things happen, the government needs to encourage us to spend. So we'll talk about this more and more and more, but it could be a tax cut that we try to get people to spend. Or right now, they're changing the way you get unemployment compensation. So if you lose your job, you get a bunch of money from the government. That encourages you to keep spending. That's how we stop the economy from collapsing, is if we can get people to spend. Quotes from Keynes now. Moreover, the contention that the unemployment which characterizes the depression is due to refusal by labor to accept a reduction of money wages is not clearly supported by the facts. So he's British, he writes funny. But what's he saying? The classicals say recessions, depressions, they fix themselves because wages and prices fall. Keynes says if you look at the facts of the depression, that's not true. Now, classical economists come back and go, it is true. And again, argument, what's the right answer? If one of us knew, we wouldn't be having two theories here arguing with each other. But it's an importante idea that Keynes says there's no facts which support this idea that wages and prices have to fall to fix a recession. Okay, another quote. This means, unfortunately, that not only are slumps and depressions exaggerated in degree, but the economic prosperity is excessively dependent on a political and social atmosphere which is congenial to the average businessman. It's the atmosphere, the economic atmosphere, where the average business person says, hey, things are good. That's how you get prosperity. You don't get prosperity when people are worried about the future. You get prosperity when the atmosphere is good and when people are, things are going to be good, things are going to be great. That's what prosperity comes from. Not some equilibrium thing, but people's belief, right? They're animal spirits. All right, again, and part of the same quote from Keynes, big chapter in his book. And again, a classical economist would say, what are you talking about? This is meaningless. But Keynes, okay, even apart from the instability due to speculation, and we'll talk about speculation a lot here, there is the instability due to the characteristic of human nature that a large proportion of our positive activities depend on spontaneous optimism rather than on a mathematical expectation, whether moral, hedonistic, or economic. You can't, Keynes says, use math to describe how people act. It's about spontaneous optimism. It's not a mathematical expectation. There's no equation you're going to write out that's going to explain how things work and how to make things better, worse, up, down, whatever it is. In Keynes's world, no math, no real math. And let me be clear that it's not that Keynes is not a math guy. He was a really good math guy at Cambridge, so good at math. Now here he says, the state of long-term expectation upon which our decisions are based does not solely depend, therefore, on the most probable forecast we can make. It also depends on the confidence with which we make this forecast, how highly we rate the likelihood of our best forecast turning out quite wrong. If we expect large changes, but are very uncertain as to what precise form these changes will take, then our confidence will be weak. Can we say the last 2 weeks? Yeah. Now, Keynes's followers are actually known as the Keynesians. Keynes died right at the end of World War II, and all of the argument and development of his theory happens after he's dead. Well, people don't like parts of his theory. People want to do math. They want to do economics as a math thing. If you took 102, you know economics, mathy. There's a huge fight to this day in economics about whether human behavior fits in these mathematical models that we try to put it in. So, huge debate to this day. The Keynesians, they want to do math. They want to do a hard theory like physics, right? They want the economy to be, drop the economy off the Empire State Building and measure the force of gravity. Keynes would say they can't do that. The Keynesians do it anyhow. Okay? So to do that, they have to take out animal spirits. They have to take out Keynes's view of expectations and replace it. They have to take financial markets out of their model. And they have to take money out of their model. So, Ben Bernanke belongs to a group called the New Keynesians. And we'll talk about them down the line here. He was chairman of the Federal Reserve. He gave speeches where he basically said, we don't read the book. We don't read the 1936 book. We think that's wrong. And then a few years later, he was giving speeches about we need to put financial markets in our system because they're not in our system. Well, if you're a Keynesian, if you really believe in Keynes, the financial markets are a critical part of your system, but the Keynesians took them out. So you've been wondering why I started this thing with Game of Thrones and why Jon Snow was in the middle of the last slide. Well, this person in front of us, named Joan Robinson, no relation. She's easily the most famous female economist of the Keynes era. She went to Cambridge, worked with Alfred Marshall, who was Keynes's teacher. She invented a whole bunch of stuff that's in 102. She had bad words to say about the Keynesians and the way they were changing what Keynes wanted. And so she used a word for them which starts with the letter B and means your parents weren't married. So I refer to these people nowadays as the Jon Snow Keynesians because I don't want to use that B word in class, but you can think of what it was. Okay? Joan Robinson was a critic of a lot of what economists did. She was being an economist too, right? Being one of the most famous economists of all time. She thought that economists did things that were misleading, that weren't realistic, that didn't fit in the real world. And what they had done to Keynes, she did not appreciate because they took the parts of his theory, whether or not they apply to anything, they took the parts of his theory out that couldn't be put into some nice, beautiful little equation. And maybe the world doesn't really work that way. Anyway, so Joan Robinson, in 102, you spend actually a lot of time doing stuff that she invented, though nobody tells you that she invented it, mostly because I don't know why, but nobody tells you. Her big contribution here in macro is adding the B word to the Keynesians. All right, we get to the 70s, and the Jon Snow Keynesians cannot explain what's going on in the 70s. So now classical economics has fallen apart. Keynesian economics has fallen apart. Why have we talked about both of them? Well, it's going to turn out that these theories are going to get revived. There's going to be some fighting, revisions, some changes, a couple new parts to this theory. But basically, modern theory is kind of a squishy together, and we'll talk about this again as we get there, squishy together of these two theories. And it's pretty easy to find people in the real world and identify their theory, and 99% of the people in the United States and the U.S. Congress and whatever, they're either classical economists or Keynesian economists, and you should be able to identify who they are.